Hi, everybody. We are going to start week 2 right now. But I am going to go over the homework. But before that, I want to talk about some of the things that came up last week. Um, if you haven't gone back and told us what the lie is, go ahead and do that. I think it's funny that when you post, and this will almost always be the case, you can't see anything until it posts. So out of our group, nobody could see anything, and I believe about 4 people mentioned having 3 cats. I know one for sure is a lie because she said so, I think, and 3 others we don't know. But I thought it was kind of funny that this 3 cat thing um, appeared to be something people were latching on. So let us know what's the truth in the lie, and we'll see how many cat people are out there and how many cats are connected to this class. Clearly, there's a lot of dog people. All right. Also, procrastination came up, and that got me thinking. In part because I teach a college success class that deals with time management, procrastination, and that. Now, that is definitely connected to writing, right? But clearly not the focus of a writing class. Since I have some information I think you might find valuable, I am going to be making a couple videos that will be optional for you, but you'll be looking at different things around procrastination, uh, time management, and some things like that, and I'm going to create them. You'll have access to them. One of the things that I immediately did, and we'll see if people are interested. If you click on communication and go to discussion, it will take you right here that lists all of our discussions. Now, typically you won't have to because I will always have it linked on the home page. It'll be blue. So, right, if it's blue, you have something to do. But when you go here, you'll see questions for tutors, right? I raise my hand. That's a place where you can ask me a question that's in public. Say you have something private, well, send me an email or an instant message because then only I will see it. If you put a question here, everybody will see it. And think about this is the in-class one. If you're confused about something, if you're wondering about a reading or just about anything, go ahead, put it there. Typically, if you have that question, anywhere from 2 to 10 other people are going to too. And even if it's just you deserve to have your confusion, right, lessened. So if you have a question for me, go ahead and put it right there. Now, as far as procrastination, I created this discussion place where I am going to be putting that additional information. You already saw the one video, but there's a couple other things that I'm going to bring in. Now, if you've done anything, right, that you feel like, you know what, I did this and it helped, here's a spot where you can post too, right? So anything around procrastination, questions, strategies, success stories, failure stories, there'd be a place to put them. And for those of you interested, you could have a whole separate conversation going on. One of the things to think about as in science, you might do research and there's a positive result and a negative result. For a scientist, they're both good. Because when you get a negative result, at least you know this doesn't work. So for example, our incandescent light bulbs, I'm drawing a blank on the guy whose name I'm sure you probably know, it'll pop into my head later, but he had teams trying something like 1,000 different types of metal to get the right filament that would finally be the light bulb that we know right before we got to LEDs. So every failure wasn't bad. It was actually a step forward because it said, hey, well, we're not going to use copper, and so we don't have to worry about that anymore. So the things that trip you up could be valuable to include there also. All right, so that was on. People also talked about the fear of judgment, which is totally understandable, especially when you take something that you're interested in and you write a paper about it or you post about it. And there's no easy answer for that, except one thing to very much keep in mind is that you and your ideas, you and your papers are not the same. It might feel like it, but you are separate from your ideas. So if somebody reads your paper and says, I don't get this, or this idea doesn't make sense, or this idea is wrong, it might feel like it, but they're not saying you are wrong. Well, you know, once in a while there will be a person who's doing like that, but they're jerks and we just ignore them. If they say the idea is wrong, that's actually a benefit to you. And you say, oh, okay, well, let me look at it, because maybe there's something about your idea, not you as a person, but your idea, that could be better explained, right? But whether you earn an A on a paper or a C on a paper or a D on a paper, that in no way makes you a good or bad person, right? Based on your grade. All the grade means is that in this point in time, based on the assignments criteria, this is where you were, right? So I have students who can be good writers and be swamped and turn in a really poor quality paper, right? And it doesn't mean they all of a sudden became, you know, lazy, bad, whatever. It was just all the stuff that went into creating this paper didn't help it make a strong one. So this is something that we'll have more time over this semester to work with. But when you start worrying about judgment, criticism and judgment in an English class academically are two very different things. Judgment is your shirt's ugly, right? Criticism is those colors aren't complementary and they jar the eye, right? That's a criticism, right? Looking at how colors play together or patterns play together. So when we're sharing papers, we're looking at criticizing the work, not the person, right? Oh, this paragraph is confusing, or this paragraph seems to have something factually incorrect, or this logic doesn't work. Those are all things you want to know so you're not presenting low quality arguments. Just a little bit, all those things came from the discussion. And again, if you haven't told us which the lie is, please go back and post. Now we're going to go back to the homework for this week, right? We're a research class, right? Writing research paper, and there's two things that go into research. Well, there's a bunch, but we're going to break it down for this week into two. One is reading, right? And the other is writing. And they're definitely not the same. When you are a researcher, you are going to read much more carefully and dig deeper than you typically would if you're just reading for pleasure. And one of the things to think about is when you write, correction, when you read, there are three levels of connections to make. The first one is text to self. So this is how do you respond to what you've read? What connections do you make between your own life and what you just read? So for example, there is a part in chapter 12 where he talks about how we are biologically set up to lean one way or the other typically, right? Liberal, conservative, libertarian, right? And he talks about how things about how you grow up in your situation can influence that. So just because your brain might be predisposed to openness, right? You might end up being a conservative person if certain experiences happen in your life, right? And the way that you're brought up and things work out, it's like, hey, I'm leaning that way, but you know what? Ultimately, I'm more conservative. And the same could go, you might be, right, lean towards conservative, but say how, you might grow up in a family, right, that you love that is very different, right, and not, and you're like, so you learn to, right, respect, love these things that are different, and so those things all battle out. And the thought that I had, so this is text to self, right? If I am definitely, as far as the traits of openness, right, and being open to new experiences and people, I absolutely, right, lean liberal, right, and care about people. I do, like he says in the book, and argue that, right, put that higher than some other things. And when I was 18, I joined the Army. And spending 3 years in the Army definitely saw, I lived out the value of loyalty, the importance of obeying authority, and of course the importance of having authority that's worth respecting. That's a big deal, right? But there are certain traits that typically would be put on the conservative side, right? Which, because my time into the Army, I greatly appreciate, because I've seen what's possible with it, and that's a part of my life that whatever the heck biology was saying is going to happen, that always is going to bounce against your world and how you grew up. So, right, leaning liberal, have the military experience, which puts a whole different, thing on authority, loyalty, and when all of a sudden, well, you get it. Right? So that would be text to self. Now, when you read the first story in This Way for the Gas, ladies and gentlemen, that's the level that I want you to stay on. Just text to self. What do you think about it? Now, we're talking about the Holocaust here, and this is rough, right? And it happened, and these stories are written in a well, you're going to read it and find out, but I want you to think how powerful these stories are in their simplicity. And this is even translated from another language, and it still has this impact. Right? So as you read it, text to self, what connections, what feelings just to come up for you. The next level is text to text. Right? This is where maybe we take something that's happening in This Way for the Gas, and later on we connect it to The Righteous Mind, or we do some research and we connect it to something else, right? And then the third one is text to world. So first I connect it to me, then I connect it to other readings. It's the next level, and the final level is, okay, how does this play out in the world, right? And right now. Now, there's a couple things that as you're reading this, right? So for Thursday, I want you to put on what makes a good reader, right? So think about what goes into, and right, you just click right on it. What makes a good academic reader, right? What does a good reader do? What's a good reading environment? How does a good reader interact with the text? Is there a role for other people in a reader's life? And anything else, right? So I ask you what goes into a good reader, and then I give you a reading assignment. So the thing that I want you to think about is, after you put down, hey, this is what a good reader does, are you doing that when you read the introduction, right? So read the introduction for This Way to the Gas. If you don't have the book, order it right now or go to the bookstore, right? But I have the first couple pieces in a PDF. I can do that legally, but not a ton of pieces. So you want to get the book. When it comes to the PDF, what I would do, right, is scroll down, hit download, right, and go ahead, get the PDF printed out. That way, when you're reading it, you can make notes on the side, you can highlight stuff, underline, put big question marks for what the heck is going here. So that way you can have a record of what's going on and how you reacted to it. A couple things about 1930s and 40s Poland, right? I don't expect you to know a ton about that. Okay, I don't expect you to know anything about Poland, right? Or the Holocaust, besides maybe that a bunch of people were killed, right? And that's about it. There are things that are going to be confusing because you do not have the history, right? So you may do a couple things, right? As a researcher, here's the one you don't want to do. Well, I don't get it. I'll just skip it. Right? At the very least, you want to put down notes by anything that is like confusing to see if you can then find the answer or find somebody who has an answer. And two things that'll probably come up right away is there is a building where when the people come on the trains, right? Mostly Jewish people, but there's a couple million other people that the Germans, the Nazis, right, were also up for killing. When those trains would come in, they would have their possessions, and all these possessions would get taken from them, and like food and things like that could go to the people in the camp. All the silver, the valuable stuff, that went to the Nazis. And all of this stuff was stored in a building that they called Canada, right? And for whatever reason, Canada, 30s, 40s, for Polish people, was like this place, this land of abundance. And if you think about it, and here's a little piece of history that Americans don't get to be too proud of, we turned away a lot of Jewish people coming from Germany and Poland, right? And I think Canada did not do exactly what we did. And so this place that has a land of abundance gets named Canada. The other thing is, you'll be reading this, and all of a sudden you'll read about some prisoners who are at the end of their ropes and about wiped out. And they'll call them Muslims. And it's like, well, where does that come from? Right? There's a few things talked about out there, but the biggest is, right, in Islam, when you pray, part of it is prostrating yourself. So your hands, knees, feet, and head is on the ground. And so one of the people in the camp had actually said is because they were so beaten down and just laying down and had given up, that was the name that they got. And then you might say to yourself, well, how would Polish people, right, even know? Well, if you do just a little bit of research, and I put a link in here, which I had to do because I did not know anything about it, as early as the 14th century, right, Muslims and actually like merchants and warriors were coming in and interacting, and then you have they're called the Tartars, and for sometimes they're living in peace in Poland, even being in the military. Then you have a war with the Ottoman Empire, which typically, right, you go to war with somebody and you're not too happy with them, so there's a lot of anti-Muslim sentiment in like this 16th century. And the population of Muslims in Poland when this started, it was incredibly small, but there were some mosques in Poland. There was, a history of connection. So they knew about prayer. And so when you find something that's like, wait, what's going on there, right? That's when research can come in. So those were two things that without research, you'd probably go on what's going on here, right? Now, this short, it's I believe 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes. This just gives you a visual of Auschwitz. And this, you can see that about things that are going to be described in the book, so it'll help give you a visual, right? If you ever have a chance to go, which I did about 20 years ago, it is a very solemn experience. I mean, I definitely felt walking around there like this place is just, I mean, you can feel it. I could feel it about how horrible the place was. But watch this. I'll give you, basically it's a drone flying over the camp, so you get to see things there. There is, of course, tons of history videos available all over the place, right, if you want more background information. So for Thursday, what makes a good reader, right? And really, really think about this. And at the end of it, I would say too, where would you rate yourself? Because most of us know, hey, this would be really helpful. Excuse me. And we don't always do it. So I want you to think about that, have a discussion with other people about what makes a good reader, and then read the introduction. As you do, take notes on what's interesting. Any questions that you have, you can put those in. I have a question section, right? My hand is raised. So that's for Thursday, right? Which must be the 23rd, right? And then for Monday, what are the characters of a good researcher, right? Characteristics. And then after you read that post, right, I want you to read the first story, and of course, I've included it right here. Right? And the other thing is, while you are reading this, I want you to take some notes. Right? You can see what sticks out for you, who can't you relate to, thoughts or feelings that come up. And then, once you've read it and you have your notes, I want you to put them right here. Right? So the introduction, you're going to keep your notes in a sense. And for this one, I want you to put what you have. Now, if you do it on Word, you can cut and paste. If you like to write stuff out, I would be okay with you taking a picture and putting the picture here. But if you think about it, got ahead of myself. I've already said these ideas. And one of the text-to-text things you can do, you can actually do intertextual. So you might have something in your introduction that you had a question about, and then it gets answered in the story, right? And you might, oh, you can make that connection. Why make connections whenever you can? Because connections make things sticky for your memory. Right? If you hear something once, it's not going to stick as well as if you've heard it 3 times. If you hear something once but can connect it to 2 other things, it's most likely going to stick better. So this is an overview of the week. Was it yesterday? Yes. Yesterday, there was somebody was quoted. He quoted actually Karen Stenner. In the book, and I went down the research rabbit hole, which I will make a video of later. So this is not all packed into one, probably on Thursday. Right. The last thing I'm going to say about this class and research, I'm going to show you the full out 100%. I want to really know what's going on. Here's all the steps that I can do the biggest search, dig deepest, and sometimes, lots of times, you are not going to want to do that. I know that. Do it this semester, right? So you build up those skills, and when it matters, right? When that thing you really care about and you want to know, that's when I assume you're going to take all this stuff and really use it. Right? If it's a topic that you're so interested in, you'll do as much as you need to get what you want, right? And you'll leave some things out because that'll work. But when you really care about something, right, I'm going to make sure you have a ton of skills and strategies to make sure you can research the hell out of that thing. All right. Have a good week. Email me if you have any questions. And of course, I'll have another video coming up on Friday, if not sooner.